At my wife's promotion speech, she thanked her boss for late-night support and mocked me. I walked up, gave her my gift, and said, "From your biggest failure." My wife stood at that podium in front of 200 people wearing the green dress I had bought her for our anniversary, holding a glass of champagne I probably paid for in some indirect way, and said the words that ended our marriage. She did not know it yet. The room was packed with her co-workers from the firm, executives in tailored suits, wives holding cocktail glasses, and people smiling the way people smile when they are standing inside a room that costs more per hour than most people make in a day. The private event space at the Marquette Hotel in downtown Minneapolis had been booked for 6 weeks. Her firm, Halverson & Cross Financial Partners, had spared nothing for the night. One of its rising stars became a senior portfolio manager. Exposed brick walls, Edison lighting, polished wood, and an open bar, stocked with things nobody in that room actually needed. Sylvia had worked for that moment for 4 years, and I had worked right alongside her, not from a corner office, not under the firm logo, not in any way anyone in that room would ever recognize, but from our kitchen table at midnight. I reviewed her client notes. I helped her prepare for presentations. I listened when the pressure became too heavy. I was the steady ground she stood on whenever the floor under her started to shake. I was proud of her. I want that understood clearly. Even as everything unraveled over the following 48 hours, even after I learned what I learned, even after I understood the full shape of the life she had been living beside our life, I was still proud of what she had built. But pride has limits. Mine ended the moment she looked out at that room, found me sitting in the third row, and said exactly what she said. My name is Reed Calloway. I am 44 years old. I have been a forensic accountant for 17 years, working out of a mid-sized firm near the warehouse district in Minneapolis. My job is to find the things people hide inside numbers, discrepancies, patterns that should not be there, quiet shifts in the record, the truth that gets buried under spreadsheets, ledgers, quarterly reports, and explanations that sound clean until you follow them all the way down. The irony of what happened to me is not lost on me. For 11 years, I believed my marriage to Sylvia was one of the truest things in my life. I was wrong. Before I tell you exactly what she said at that podium, you need to understand who we were, because none of what happened makes sense without the before. Sylvia and I met in our early 30s at a mutual friend's dinner party in St. Paul. She was working as a junior analyst at a wealth management firm. She was newly divorced from a man she described as emotionally unavailable, which I now understand was her way of saying she needed someone who would show up completely. I showed up. That was always my thing. I showed up. At the time, I was in my second year running forensic audits for a regional accounting firm. It was not glamorous work. It was late nights, bad coffee, depositions, and hours of staring at ledgers that looked normal until they suddenly did not. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Uptown. Sylvia wore vintage blazers and had a laugh that made strangers at nearby restaurant tables turn around just to find where the sound had come from. We dated for 2 years before I proposed on the Stone Arch Bridge over the Mississippi. It was nothing extravagant, just the two of us, the river below us, and a ring I had saved 8 months to buy. She cried. I cried a little too, which I would deny under oath, but will not deny here. We got married at a small venue near Lake Minnetonka in the summer. There were 40 people there. My brother Ben stood beside me as best man. Her college roommate Dana was her maid of honor. We served pot roast, and Sylvia made the playlist herself. Those first years were genuinely good. The kind of good that does not need to announce itself. We had a rhythm. I handled the finances, she handled the social calendar. She pushed me to exercise more. I pushed her to sleep more. We disagreed about plenty of things and agreed about the ones that mattered. We bought a house in the Kenwood neighborhood, a 1930s craftsman with a porch that needed work and a backyard Sylvia slowly turned into something you would photograph for a magazine. When Sylvia moved to Halverson & Cross about 4 years into our marriage, her career shifted into another gear. The firm managed high net worth portfolios, old Minneapolis money, some new tech money filtering down from the coasts, and Sylvia was very good at making wealthy people feel understood. She was warm, strategic, relentlessly prepared. She was also somewhere around her second year at the new firm, becoming someone I had to schedule time with. At first, I told myself it was the industry. Finance has a culture that swallows evenings and weekends. Her boss, a man named Garrett Wexler, ran a lean team and kept them working constantly. Garrett was 49, twice divorced, and the kind of man who wore success like a piece of clothing tailored specifically to remind everyone else of the gap between him and them. I met him maybe a dozen times over 4 years. Firm events, a charity gala downtown, the occasional dinner. He was polished. He remembered names. He asked about your life in a way that felt personal until you realized he did it with everyone. I did not like him. I want to be honest about that. Not because of anything I knew then, but because of something I sensed. A particular kind of attention he paid to Sylvia. Something I filed away without examining too closely. I was busy. That is my contribution to how things got where they got. I was managing a complicated corporate fraud case involving a construction company out of Eden Prairie, and it was consuming me. It was the kind of case where you work backward through 4 years of financial records, trying to locate the exact point where the story changes. 16-hour days. Weekends at the office on France Avenue. Takeout containers. Cold coffee. Long stretches where my body came home, but my mind was still buried inside someone else's ledgers. Sylvia understood, she said. She was understanding about a lot of things that year. Late in her 3rd year at the firm, she started getting distant in a particular way. Not hostile. Sylvia was never hostile. Just unavailable in a way that did not match her schedule. She would be home physically inside our house and somehow not quite there. When I mentioned it, she said she was stressed about a big client review. When the review passed, she said she was worried about a personnel change on her team. After that, there was another deadline, another client issue, another internal shift. There was always a next thing. There is always a next thing when someone needs there to be. My brother Ben said something to me over beers at a place on Nicollet Avenue about 8 months before the promotion. He said, "Reed, you are better at reading other people's books than your own." I laughed at the time because Ben says things like that. He has this quality where he can hand you something true and make it sound like a fortune cookie, so you do not have to decide how seriously to take it. I should have taken it seriously. The promotion announcement came on a Thursday. Sylvia texted me from the office around 2 in the afternoon. Garrett just confirmed it, Senior Portfolio Manager. The dinner is in 3 weeks at the Marquette. I sent back 3 words. You earned it. She sent back a heart. That was the extent of our communication that day. She did not come home until after 10. I was still awake, working at the kitchen table when she came in smelling like a restaurant I had not been invited to. She was in good spirits. I asked how she had celebrated. She said the team had gone out. I did not ask which team. I did not ask where. I know how that sounds. I want to be clear. I was not suspicious in any investigated, documented way. I was only the kind of not quite right that you dismiss because you would rather be wrong than right about something like that. The forensic accountant in me recognized the pattern discrepancies. The husband in me kept overriding the audit. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Sylvia prepare for her speech. She worked on it at the desk in our spare bedroom with the door slightly closed. When I offered to read a draft, she said it was not ready yet. When the dress for the event arrived, a dark green wrap dress from a boutique in Edina, she showed it to me briefly, like something she was confirming rather than sharing. The night before the dinner, I ironed my suit jacket in the bedroom while she did her nails at the vanity. We talked about nothing important. Weekend plans, whether we needed to call the furnace company before winter. Safe, horizontal conversation that never goes anywhere, but also never demands anything. I went to bed first. She stayed up later than usual, her phone resting on her lap, the screen angled away from me. Ben's voice kept moving through my head. You are better at reading other people's books than your own. The morning of the event, I wrapped a gift for her. It was a small flat box from a jewelry store on Hennepin. A bracelet she had admired once in a window when we were walking to brunch. She had pointed it out casually, probably not expecting me to remember. But I remembered. I wrapped it myself in dark blue paper, tied it with a ribbon, and wrote on the card, "To the most capable person I know, tonight is yours." I set it on the kitchen counter before she came downstairs. She picked it up, read the card, and said, "You did not have to do that." I wanted to, I said. She put it in her bag without opening it and said she would open it later at the dinner, when she could really appreciate it. That was the last gentle moment between us. The Marquette Hotel sits on South 7th Street in downtown Minneapolis, a few blocks from Target Field. It is the kind of building that has gone through several lives. Grand once, institutional for a while, renovated now into a particular version of expensive understatement. The event space on the second floor had that same quality. We arrived together. Sylvia was immediately absorbed by colleagues and clients, the social gravity of someone being celebrated pulling her toward the center of every cluster. I found myself at the bar, then at a table with a couple I vaguely knew from a previous firm event. A man named Doug, who ran a subsidiary, and his wife, whose name I could not catch over the ambient noise. I watched Sylvia work the room. I want to be clear about what I saw. She was brilliant at it. Warm, present, specific with each person, remembering details that made people feel seen. She touched arms lightly when she laughed. She tilted her head when she listened. She was performing the best version of herself, and it was genuine. That was the thing about Sylvia. She was not fake. She really did care about those people. I saw Garrett Wexler arrive about 30 minutes in. He moved through the room the way men like him do, unhurried, acknowledged, without ever seeming to reach for the acknowledgement. He found Sylvia near the window overlooking 7th Street. When they spoke, I watched something pass between them that I cannot describe with perfect precision, except to say it was familiar in a way it should not have been. It was not long, a minute, maybe two. Then he moved on to others. Sylvia looked across the room and found me at my table. She smiled. I smiled back. I held her eyes for a second longer than I needed to. She looked away first. The speeches began around 8:30 p.m. The managing partner, a silver-haired man named Philip, opened with the practiced cadence of someone who had given the same kind of remarks 40 times before. He talked about firm history, growth quarterly performance, and values in the kind of language that sounds important without saying anything specific. There was polite applause. Then Sylvia stood. She was composed. She was brilliant. The room gave her its complete attention, and she deserved that attention. That part remains true even now. She spoke about the firm's culture, about the clients who trusted her with the things they had built their lives around, and about the privilege of working in a place that valued integrity. Then she paused. It was a practiced pause, the pause of someone who had rehearsed a particular moment. But more than anything, Sylvia said, "I want to acknowledge the people who made this possible." She turned toward one table. My team, Tyler, Amara, Preston. You three are the reason I survived the last 4 years. The applause was warm and genuine, and I owe so much to this firm's leadership for creating an environment where I could grow. Another pause, and especially to Garrett. She turned slightly toward where Garrett stood near the bar. Your mentorship, your support, especially at night when I needed guidance most. I could not have gotten here without you. Laughter moved through the room the way it does when something lands with insider warmth. The kind of laughter that implies everyone already knows the context. Then she looked down for half a second, and finally, she looked out across the room and her eyes found me. My husband, Reed, who tried. A small smile, a light laugh from a few tables. He never quite had what it takes for this world, but he was supportive in his own way. More laughter. I think most of it was meant affectionately. The kind of joke a spouse makes when they are comfortable enough to tease. The kind of public teasing that people excuse because it is wrapped in a smile. But that is not what I heard. I heard every word land with a precise weight that I do not think she fully intended. Or maybe she did. Maybe we sometimes say things that are exactly the shape of what we actually mean without committing to them fully enough to be held responsible. Who tried? Never quite had what it takes, especially to Garrett, especially at night. The room was applauding. I sat there for 4 seconds. I counted them. I do not know why. Then I stood up. I reached under my chair, where I had been keeping the wrapped gift I had planned to give her privately after the speeches. The dark blue paper, the ribbon, the card she had already read that morning and never really responded to. I walked to the podium. The applause was fading. Sylvia looked confused at first, then adjusted her expression into something welcoming. I think she believed I was coming up to hug her. That would have been the move in a normal marriage on a normal night. I set the box on the podium in front of her. Then I leaned toward the microphone. "From your biggest failure," I said, and I walked out. I want to tell you about the 48 hours after that night, because that is where everything actually happened. I sat in my car in the Marquette Hotel parking structure on 8th Street for 20 minutes. My hands were on the steering wheel and I was not doing anything. The forensic accountant part of my brain, the part that processes information before emotion, the part that is always looking for the shape of the truth underneath the surface story, was working very quietly. It was laying out everything it had been cataloging for months: the late evenings, the angled phone screen, the restaurant smell, the way she had said Garrett's name at the podium with a particular ease, the way people say words they have spoken privately many times. My phone was ringing. I let it ring. When I finally drove home, I went to my study, a small room off the back hallway that Sylvia called my cave. I sat at my desk and thought about what I actually knew versus what I suspected. Because there is a difference. I have built a career on that difference. Suspicion is not evidence. Pattern recognition is not proof. The same instinct that makes me good at my job has also made me wrong at different points in my life, because I fitted the pattern before confirming the data. So I was careful. I pulled up our joint account statements, something I had not examined carefully in months, because our finances had been stable and I had been preoccupied. I was not looking for anything specific. I was looking for the thing that did not match. I found it within 40 minutes. Over a period of 14 months, there were recurring charges at a hotel in St. Louis Park, a boutique property called the Depot Inn on Excelsior Boulevard. The charges appeared every 2 to 4 weeks. They were small enough individually not to stand out: valet, room service, incidental spending, the kind of charges that could mean a dozen things if viewed separately. But the pattern was unmistakable once I looked at it properly. Tuesday and Thursday evenings mostly, occasionally a Saturday. The dates corresponded to Sylvia's late nights at the office. Not all of them, but enough. I sat with that for a long time. Sylvia came home around midnight. I heard her key in the front door. I heard her heels on the hardwood in the entryway. I heard her pause, probably registering that the house was lit differently than she expected. She found me in the kitchen. She was still holding the gift box. She had opened it. The ribbon was off the paper, carefully torn at one end, and the box lid sat askew. The bracelet I had chosen was visible inside. Her eyes were red. I do not know exactly what that means. Maybe she had been crying. Maybe she had just spent a long night in a loud room. I cannot interpret that for you with certainty. "Read," she said. "Sit down," I said, not unkindly. She sat across from me at the kitchen table where I had spent so many late nights working. The same table where I had helped her prepare for presentations. The same table where I had reviewed her client notes and been whatever kind of quiet support a spouse can be from the sidelines of someone else's ambition. I slid the printed bank statements across the table. I had highlighted the relevant entries. The sequence of emotions that moved across her face over the next 30 seconds has stayed with me. First came the look of someone being asked a question they had expected eventually. Then came the collapse of the particular performance a person maintains when they are still hoping to control the information. "How long?" I asked. She looked at the bracelet still sitting in the box between us. "Almost 2 years," she said. I exhaled slowly. 2 years is a particular number. 2 years means it was not a mistake that happened once, was regretted, was wrestled with, and ended. 2 years means it was a life that ran alongside our life. "Garrett," I said. She did not answer. That was an answer. "Was anything you said tonight intentional?" I asked. "At the podium." She looked at me, then. Really looked at me. With the full attention she had been distributing so carefully around the event room all evening. "I do not know," she said. "I think I have been building to something, and I did not know it would come out like that." "Especially at night," I said. She closed her eyes. "I did not sleep that night. I lay in the guest room. We had a tacit and immediate understanding that the arrangements had shifted. I looked at the ceiling of our Kenwood Craftsman house and thought about the 11 years I had spent building a life I apparently only partly understood. I am not going to tell you I was without fault in our marriage. A forensic accountant's marriage has particular pressures. I was gone mentally for stretches. The Eden Prairie case alone took 8 months of my full presence and gave it to someone else's ledgers. I missed dinners. I missed the gradual drift of small attentions. I told myself the foundation was solid enough that the surface could flex. I was wrong about that. But here is what I also know. Being imperfect does not make you deserving of what happened to you. Those are not the same accounting equation, no matter how someone tries to balance them. I gave what I had. I gave it honestly. That has to mean something even when it does not change the outcome. In the morning, I called my brother Ben. I know that was the first thing he said. What do you mean, you know? There was a pause. I saw something about 6 months ago, he said. I did not know how to... He stopped. I should have told you. What did you see? He had been at a fundraiser for a children's hospital in Edina, one of those events where Minneapolis money shows up in November with checkbooks and good intentions. He saw Sylvia and Garrett Wexler standing outside near the valet area talking, then briefly, but clearly something more than talking. He had driven home that night and sat in his car for 20 minutes, he said, not knowing what to do with it. You should have told me, I said.
I know, he said.
Reed, I know. I am sorry. I held the phone for a while without speaking. I need a lawyer, I said. My professional instincts did not switch off just because the material had become personal. If anything, they became more precise because the stakes were higher. I retained a family law attorney named Patricia Osei, who worked out of an office near the Minneapolis Convention Center. She was calm, thorough, and immediately identified 3 things that mattered: the duration of the affair, the joint account evidence, and the nature of Sylvia's public comments at the promotion dinner, specifically whether they had been witnessed and could be characterized as deliberate humiliation. 2 of Sylvia's colleagues reached out to me independently and unsolicited within 4 days of the event. Both had been in that room. Both referenced her remarks as memorable, meaning they had registered as more than polite laughter for some people. One of them, a woman named Cora, who had been with the firm for 6 years, said, I do not know what is happening between you two, but what she said was not right. I thought you should know. People noticed. Sylvia reached out twice that week to discuss terms informally. I directed her to Patricia. That was not coldness for its own sake. It was the recognition that when emotion, interest, self-protection, and grief are all operating in the same conversation at the same time, the conversation produces nothing useful. We needed a structure that could hold the facts. Sylvia moved into her sister's apartment in Linden Hills. I stayed in the Kenwood house. Our dog, a 4-year-old retriever named Comet, had always been more mine in temperament, though we had always called him ours. He slept on the floor beside my bed every night that week, with a patient loyalty that I will not pretend did not help. Through Patricia's discovery process, I learned that Garrett Wexler had been involved with at least one other person at the firm before Sylvia. Not a firm-wide scandal exactly, but known enough. His second divorce had involved similar circumstances. He and Sylvia had not, as far as either of them seemed to have planned, intended to become public. The promotion speech in Sylvia's accounting to Patricia had been a moment of pressure where she had said things she had not fully thought through. The bracelet disappeared from the kitchen table. I do not know what Sylvia did with it. I hope she kept it. I picked it out because she actually liked it, not as a gesture that required anything in return. The card I had written that morning said, "To the most capable person I know." I think about that sometimes. It was true when I wrote it, probably still is in some technical sense. Truth and goodness are not always the same inventory. 6 months after the night at the Marquette Hotel, I am sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning in October with lake light coming through the windows of my office and a new case open in front of me. A medical device company out of Plymouth has bookkeeping with the particular smell of creative accounting, the kind I have learned to recognize, the way a sommelier recognizes a compromised bottle. The divorce was finalized in September. The house in Kenwood was sold. We split the equity, which was substantial. After 8 years of appreciation in that neighborhood, I rent an apartment now in the North Loop, a converted warehouse building near the rail yards with high ceilings, exposed brick, and windows that face west. It is, objectively speaking, a good apartment. It took me 3 months to stop thinking of it as a temporary arrangement and start thinking of it as where I live. Ben came up from Rochester the weekend I moved in. We built a bookshelf from a flat-pack kit, ordered food from a Thai place on Washington Avenue, watched a baseball game, and did not talk about Sylvia for most of it. That was the right call. Sylvia and Garrett Wexler are no longer at the same firm. What I understand is that his conduct history, once examined more carefully by HR, in the context of the divorce proceedings, created enough institutional discomfort that one of them needed to go. She stayed. He took a position at a boutique firm in the suburbs. I do not take satisfaction in that, or I try not to. The forensic part of my brain files it under consequences exist, which is the professional version of the personal understanding that actions have weight. Here is what I actually learned, not from the betrayal itself, but from the accounting of myself I had to do afterward. I was good at being present for a crisis. Emergency, high stakes, immediate need. I showed up fully. What I was worse at was the maintenance mode of intimacy. The texture of daily showing up that keeps two people's lives genuinely interwoven instead of merely parallel. I filed away the signs because examining them required a different kind of attention than my job had trained me for. Not the backward-looking audit of what happened after the fact, but the real-time attention to what was quietly changing while it was still happening. That is the work I am doing now. Not on a relationship. I am not there yet, and I am not in a hurry. I am working on myself, on the habit of presence in my own life, the same way I have always been present for other people's problems. My father used to say, the last place a plumber looks for a leak is his own house. He meant it as a professional joke. I understand it differently now. I went back to the Stone Arch Bridge last month. I am not sure why. I was not looking for anything. I just found myself walking there on a Sunday morning, when the air had that particular Minneapolis September quality. Cold coming, summer not quite gone. The Mississippi moved the way it does when the season is turning. I stood where I had stood when I proposed to Sylvia, and I held both things at once. The real thing that had existed then, and the real thing that had happened since. Both true, both mine to carry. A forensic accountant's instinct is to find the fraud, expose it, and restore the accurate record. But life does not have a restated filing. You cannot resubmit the last 11 years with corrections noted. You just carry the full ledger forward. The gains, the losses. The entries that do not reconcile. The ones that do. I stood there for about 20 minutes. Comet sat beside me the whole time, watching the water with whatever patience dogs have for the things they do not understand. Then we walked home. What still gets me about my own story is that I was not blindsided because I was stupid. I was blindsided because I was loyal. And there is a difference. Loyalty makes you give people the benefit of the doubt longer than you should. It makes you explain away the things you already know. It makes you trust instead of investigate the person you love. I do not think that is weakness. I think that is what a good husband looked like until the person receiving that loyalty forgot what it was worth. The sad truth is that sometimes the person who shows up most completely is the person who gets taken for granted the hardest. So if you are the Reed in your own life right now, the one holding everything together while someone else takes the credit, pay attention to what the numbers are actually telling you. You deserve a life where your presence is valued, not merely used.